Welcome, everyone, to the Veterans Psychedelic Discourse. We are a group that advocates for safe and responsible exploration of mental health treatments, and this is not a platform for the solicitation of illegal substances. So today's guest is Luke Schartiger. Luke is a veteran with multiple deployments to Iraq, Afghanistan, and Africa, and brings a unique perspective to the field of trauma healing. He has served in the special operations community and worked as a law enforcement officer at both local and federal levels. With an associate's degree in intelligence operations, a bachelor's in criminal justice, and a master's in counseling, Luke combines his extensive knowledge and expertise to guide veterans towards holistic healing. As a certified six-phase meditation instructor and the founder of Delta Level Connections, Luke is dedicated to helping those who have served to harness their innate ability to heal themselves and overcome trauma. So without further ado, everyone, let's just welcome Luke. Thanks for coming, man.
Hey, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being here.
So you have quite a interesting, yeah, with like a full life, it sounds like, with all those things going on.
Yeah, many,
Um,
many, many lives it feels.
so I definitely want to get into Delta Level Connections, but do you care to share a little bit about your story about how you got to that point?
Yeah, so me and Alex kind of been talking a little bit earlier. I've kind of had a hard time deciding where to really start my journey because, like Alex said, I feel like I really have lived so many different lives and gone through so many different things that I feel can help me connect with people on certain levels of trauma. So I think I'm going to touch on a few different things leading up, if that's okay. So really throughout my childhood it was pretty tumultuous, right? My father was a drug addict and he had a lot of abusive tendencies and things of that nature, and so it really kind of molded the way I view the world and kind of my emotional intelligence as well. And my real kind of, I guess, hard point in my growth from that childhood trauma was just shutting everything down, right? Not understanding how to experience emotions or show emotions or process emotions. I just continued to shove all that inside of me because it was safer that way. At least I thought it was. And so after, all my childhood time and doing that, I joined the military. I joined the army, and they really teach a lot of those same things because, right, we're preparing for war. We're preparing to do things that are probably going to be pretty shocking to our systems in general. And so it was kind of along the same lines. You got to shut everything down. You got to have to become this certain type of tough guy, for lack of a better words. And so I continued to do that. And I wanted to be successful. I've always had a drive to be successful. I've always felt like I was meant to do a lot. I don't know why or where it came from. I just felt that. And so I pushed myself really, really hard to be everything I needed to be at whatever instance I was at. So military time, I pushed myself as hard as I could possibly push myself to get, all these successes and accolades, and not really feel like I was a nobody, because that's ultimately how I felt growing up in my childhood years, is that I just wasn't really worth much or wasn't really, going to be anything. And so I pushed myself. But that continued to do the same thing. It continued to shut myself down to any ability of connection, like true connection. I didn't know it at the time, but now I'm able to communicate that. So I joined the military. I did, my first long deployment to Iraq and got back and had the opportunity to go over to the Joint Special Operations Command and work with them quite a bit. Deployed to, Afghanistan a few times, and then got the opportunity to go to Africa and kind of stand up operations the way the Joint Special Operations Command did it in the AFRICOM environment. So great opportunity. I jumped right on board and went and did that. Went back and forth 12 times to Africa, to just varying countries, doing, different mission sets and whatnot. Um, So after I met my wife, who's, we're actually going through a divorce now, I decided I was going to get out of kind of the deployment realm and the military realm, and so I quit deploying, and we settled down, we got married, and I tried to figure out what I was going to do next. I had no idea. That's pretty much all I knew. It was about 10 years of deploying. And so I went back to school. I finished my associate's degree, and then I finished my bachelor's degree. And my now ex talked me into trying law enforcement. I was like, I really don't know if that's the path for me, but I applied and I got the job, and I ended up loving the whole law enforcement world and the realm. It was natural for me, right? Like, I came from deploying, and now I get to chase people down in the streets of my city, and take, people who've done horrible things off the streets. And I felt like I was still kind of following that line of service, right? It felt good for me to feel like, I feel kind of certain way inside and a certain way about myself, but at least I'm showing service to the community around me, and it made me feel a little bit better, even though inside I still wasn't able to really connect with myself because of all those just kind of emotional thing, and the real, like, the moral injuries from my deployments and things. Like I said, we were preparing ourselves to do these things that were going to shock our systems, and for me it was a shock to my system, but it was so, like, prepared for that, it just kind of did the same thing. It just went back down. um but I say all that because I moved on from that and went to law enforcement, but I experienced a lot of the same, I guess, incidents. People still got killed. People were still, you still saw that violence and different things. And I was still in that world because I was taking these people who were violent or whatever off the street. So I had to involve myself in that world. So it was really a lot of the same. I went to the Marshal Service after being, a city police officer, and just really wanted to continue this uh, level of success that I thought I had to have to be a person, a good person, a person that anybody would really care about in life. But I realized that I was, again, just chasing a career and chasing those successes. And so I quit the Marshal Service. I went to probation. I became a probation officer here in Arizona, thinking that that would kind of slow things down for me and give me kind of the ability to start to heal all these traumas and be the family man that I always wanted to be. Because, again, like, family was what I never really felt like I was close to growing up, but it's all I wanted as an adult. All I cared about was having a family, being a good husband, being a good dad. That was what was in my heart. But I just couldn't quite get there because of all these traumas, and my marriage ended up falling apart. Things didn't go well, pretty much the whole time I was married. And eventually I was like, okay, I feel like I've tried all these outpatient therapies and modalities and different things from the VA, and none of them seemed to really do much for me. It was kind of it was like small band-aids that would last, a week or two, and then I would feel the exact same way. And so I was getting close to that, like, desperation point. It's like, I just want to be better. I just want to feel okay in life. I don't want to feel the same way that I've always felt, suicidal or just depressed all the time, or not knowing how to even navigate the world that I so desperately wanted to be in, which was that family life, and just kind of be a normal citizen, if if you will. Um, so I went to a residential treatment facility here in Tucson, Arizona, and I was like, well, this is huge, right? To go to a residential facility was a huge step for me, to feel like I'm basically giving up my entire life, to go and try to get better. But about a week into it is when my wife asked for a divorce, and so it really kind of rocked my world. It really sent me to, like, that bottom of the barrel. Like, what do I do now? This is all I ever cared about, was my family. Even though I messed it up, I wasn't who I needed to be to keep a family. I still wanted it. I still wanted to be a good husband and good father, all those things. So I hit that rock bottom point, and I decided that I was going to dig even deeper into trying to find my healing. And I didn't know what that would look like. I had no clue, where it would lead me. But that was my decision. It was either, okay, you can stay on the same path that you've really been following this whole time of you're getting to get your worth from successes and accomplishments, or and ultimately destroy yourself because inside you're not healing, and those successes and accomplishments don't really do anything for you inside. So I probably would have ended up um, taking my own life, if I'm being completely open, on that path. Or I can dig into this just absolute whatever I can do and whatever I can find, I'm gonna go for to try to heal and be an okay person. And so that's what I did. I decided, you know what, I'm gonna just be as savage as much as I possibly can on this journey of healing. I just want to do anything and everything I possibly can to heal. And so, kind of a coincidental moment. I'm now in my RV. I'm not with my family anymore. I'm back in Flagstaff where I live. I'm by myself. I'm alone. You know, I'm going through my ups and downs of losing what I feel like is my whole world, and now trying to navigate this new this new world. You know, like I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. um the career path I had been on is now gone. You know, I don't have my career anymore. I don't have my family anymore. I don't have a home anymore. um and so I got online and I just started Googling treatment for veterans, treatment for PTSD, Eastern medicine. I just, you know, random things to try to see what would pop up. And one of the first things that popped up was ayahuasca. It's so I was like, I've never heard of ayahuasca before, I had no clue what it was, but I started researching it, trying to find out, you know, if there was any efficacy to this South American root that is supposedly healing people. Start watching all these videos, and there's just tons of veterans saying it completely changed their life. I'm like, well, I'll do anything. I Up until this point in my life, psychedelics had not been like something I really even thought about. It was, and if I did think about it, it was I pretty much subscribed to the society norm at the time, which was, well, it's just hippie stuff. It's a drug. Um, it's not something that's for healing. It's just to go have fun. You know, if you go to a hippie concert, you take psychedelics. That's really the only thought process I had about it. Um, But again, I was willing to do just about anything to see if something could help me heal and be okay. Because up until that point, I had no even ability to access what was going on inside of me to even think about healing myself. You know, they talk about process your emotions. Well, I didn't even know how to look at an emotion, let alone process it and heal from whatever it was. Um, so I started looking for places to do ayahuasca, and the only thing I found was in South America. The things that were available in the States were shut down because of the whole COVID stuff, and so I really had no option, or I thought I didn't, because I wasn't able to go out of the States at that time. So then another kind of strange connection happened. I had been off of social media for, you know, probably 8 years or so, and hadn't been in contact with a lot of people that I used to have contact with. But after my wife filed for divorce, I was like, I'm gonna get social media again and try to reconnect with some people. So probably 2 weeks before I was doing this research, I had started my Facebook account. And right after my research, so just a span of a couple of weeks, an old buddy who I used to deploy to Africa with just sent me a quick message saying, "Hey, it's been, you know, several years. Good to see you on Facebook again. We should catch up." And so we started messaging here and there, and he randomly brought up ayahuasca, and I was like, "I was just researching this. Like, what do you know about it?" And he said it changed his life. And you could really see, like, kind of in his face, in his eyes, that he wasn't the same person that I knew when we were deploying. And you know, like he was still the same person, but you could just see this kind of lightness. Like he wasn't really holding on to all these things that up until that point I was still holding on to. Not really willingly holding on to, but subconsciously not knowing how to get rid of any of it. And so I saw this in him and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so we talked a little bit more, and he said he had a friend who was a shaman who does ceremonies, and he was going to do a ceremony in like a couple weeks. And he's like, I'll make sure you have a spot if you want it. And I was like, I'm in right then and there. I was ready. I was like, I'm in. So he brought, I got my plane ticket. I flew out there and did my ayahuasca ceremony. I don't know how deep into that we want to go. I'll kind of leave that open after I let you know how I got to this point, and then you can tell me. But so I get there, and I had just this absolute life changing experience. And so since that time, I've just been doing anything and everything possible to integrate it into my life, integrate that experience into how I feel every day and how I kind of process the world in general, my worldview, basically. But it was really my buddy who I used to deploy with who brought me into this world, which is what into that psychedelic realm to help heal, which is why I feel like I can't continue living like the same way. I After he brought me in, all I want to do is to bring as many people in to find their healing as possible. And so I've really just kind of dug into that as deep as I possibly could. So that's really like kind of this this shortened version of progression into what brought me into that kind of world to begin with.
And you were when we were speaking prior to opening up the event, you were mentioning that it's not like Wounded Warriors or a couple of other ayahuasca situations where it's like sponsored by a veteran organization that helps people go out of the country. It's within the country, and it was Wounded Healer Project. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my buddy who brought me in, he's got his own nonprofit organization called the Wounded Healer Project, and is what they're doing. Well, they're going to do a lot of great things, but their main focus right now is in the prison system. So a lot of prisoners, veterans who are in prison, are having to wait 30 plus days before they're even able to like talk about getting any help, any counseling or anything. So he's a clinical counselor, clinical therapist, and so is what they're doing is they're going into these prisons and offering free services to the veterans immediately. So I mean, they come in and they're able to get free therapy services right then and there on the spot, and that's huge because obviously they've already probably hit like what their rock bottom is, but now they're in prison too. And that's a whole nother realm of trauma in and of itself. So it's just a great organization that he started. Him and his co-founder, Tegan, they are just doing some great work in the therapy world for veterans. And it's the Wounded Healer Project. Yeah, they're out of Colorado.
Hey, so
Okay.
I didn't realize that you were prior LEO as well. Maybe
Mhm.
I wonder if you might be able to speak to what it was like going through that process of like, I mean, I can only imagine, you know what I mean? You're going from law
Yeah,
enforcement to engaging in something that like, I mean, that takes a lot of bravery, man, honestly, just
yeah,
recognize.
yeah. No problem. So, um, I was never raised in the sense of like you have to respect the law, and the law is like this big thing above you, and you have to, like I was never raised that. I never really thought much about law enforcement. I didn't have a lot of interaction with them, despite kind of, growing up probably closer to the criminal realm than anything else. Um, but I never really thought much about the police, and I didn't have very many interactions with them in general. But it seemed like, well, I don't know what else I'm doing after deployments, so I'll try it. And then I just loved it so much. It was such a fun job in the States. But you're right, like I was going through and upholding all these laws that are supposedly, we can't let people get away with. But then to go from that to just the complete opposite realm of like, I'm going to go do something illegal because it's going to heal me. I don't think I really put a lot of thought into the law side of it. I think I was so far like just wanting help. Like I was just at that breaking point. It's like I just want to be okay in life that I didn't even give it a thought. It was
Gotcha.
like, yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah.
No, it
I,
does. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say I remember being at that point too, where it's like if I get locked up to get better, okay, man, I'll do
Like,
10.
yeah,
Then like
like
fine, whatever,
whatever
man.
whatever sacrifice I need to
Yeah.
make to get better, because I know for a fact, like intellectually, I know if I'm a healed person, I'm going to be a great father. If I'm not healed, I'm going to have trauma responses that are going to be hard on my children. And so that was like one of my main thoughts. And it used to be, you know, obviously it used to be a thought for my wife as well, but I don't get to have that place in her life anymore. You know, that's the choice that she made. So I can't really think about that. So I have to be as good of a person as I can for my kids. And that's really, I didn't necessarily care about myself at the time as much as I did them. Now, after my ceremony, that was one of the things I learned in my ceremony is self-love. It was very, very, very overwhelming to feel and to, because I don't think I've ever felt it before. And then to have it in like just an instant was super overwhelming. But now I realize that self-love is what gives you the ability to love others.
Mm.
And so that's been a big focus.
Mm. So, how much time goes by from when you go and take part in this ceremony to, you know, start establishing something like Delta level connections? Like, was it immediate? Like, you started working on it? Did you have that like epiphany, or was it more of like working on yourself and realize that you could kind of help share what you were kind of discovering about yourself and like the holes in your game, so to speak?
Yeah, great question. So it's a little bit of both. There's definitely a lot of working on myself that was taking place. And I had started working on these different programs from this company called mindvalley.com. And it was like some meditation programs, some like varying levels of consciousness type programs, which again kind of ties into meditation because that's ultimately what you're doing is you're accessing those different levels. And it's the same thing with psychedelics, right? The psychedelics is what accesses those levels of consciousness that we're not used to in our awakened state. And when you were able to access those, it's so much easier to pull these traumas out. So I started using those programs to integrate and to work on myself and to start to heal myself. And that was just a enormous portion of probably the next several months after my first ceremony was trying to access those traumas inside of me that I wasn't able to really access before. And one of the sayings I use about ayahuasca is I had this vault inside of me that I put everything in, all my emotions, all my feelings, you know, all those things, all the traumas, all the moral injuries, anything and everything that would elicit hurtful emotions, I shoved into this vault. And after a certain point, I didn't have access to that vault anymore. The key didn't work, couldn't open it, it was shut. That was it. So I couldn't bring anything out to work on and heal because I didn't have access. And then the ayahuasca just dropped a massive bomb and just blew this safe out of my body. And so I was able to access those different things. But the way that I was able to access it was through these meditation practices where I could go into my theta level of consciousness, which is right before you fall asleep, which is the delta level of consciousness is your sleep-in state. So I would go into theta, which is just before that, and you can actually access that subconscious realm and start pulling these incidences to the forefront of your mind, but then you can start analyzing them and you can start like going through them. You can feel those emotions that you felt at the time, um, but they are not quite as overwhelming in that state. And you're able to start saying, oh, this is what that feels like. And then you can start to pull it up a little bit more and a little bit more. And eventually, whatever emotion it is, for me, a lot of times it was, you know, I would just be crying and crying and crying. I would pull that out and I would cry and cry and I'd think about it and I'd process. And processing for me was to feel it, which would be, you know, why I'm crying. And then it's like, okay, that was it. I felt it. And now I have to let it go. And letting go of that was a big thing. But it's almost like you visualize that energy coming out of your body and releasing it. And so I started to do this with all these different traumas that I had experienced over my life. And I started to realize that I was starting to feel better and better and better each and every day and just kind of feeling more at peace. And it was it was probably two months after my ceremony where I'm the type of guy where I'm always looking for something bigger and better. So I was working a 9 to 5 job, but I've always been like I want my own business, and I've had things here and there, but I didn't know where I was going to go where I'm at now in my healing journey to a business aspect. All I knew was I really wanted to help other people kind of just at least realize that it was possible to heal. And so that was like my initial thought of starting a business. Is like I want people to actually at least realize that it's possible, because I was at the point where I didn't think it was possible. I thought I was pretty much just doomed to feel like this for the rest of my life, however long that may be. And the same company that was doing these meditations and stuff did a coaching certification course. So I was like, oh, this is it. Like I will be, because I have a master's degree in counseling, but I don't have a license, so I can't like actually counsel people. But technically, I can coach people, for free. And so I thought, this is it. Like I'll become a coach to help people pull these things out and realize what their traumas even are, and help them work through and process and find that healing like I did. And so I started this certification course, and I thought it was going to be, I've always thought like had that accolades is what's going to get you clients. And so I thought I had to do a certification. I don't think you do, but this is what got me kind of on that line of thinking. So I did this certification course. It was 4 months long, and it's probably a week after that was done is when I started working on my website and trying to get it put together and in place. And like, what am I going to offer? How am I going to offer it? And trying to put all that package together. So
And
yeah,
I believe
it wasn't long. It wasn't long after.
and it's only been up for, I think, did you say it was July?
I believe it was July. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was July, like July 15th, I think is when I went live with my website. It took me a
So,
while.
I mean, everything takes time. I'm curious. So I put the link into the chat box if anyone wants to check out the website. But is it, as it stands, what do you want it to be, or what's the final end game of what you want to do as far as the services that you're providing and everything involved?
Yeah, so it's definitely a work in progress, right? Like it's just been live for a few months now, and the services that I provide, I want to make sure I tailor those services to the need, right? So I don't know necessarily like how my current services, because I don't have the numbers and data to really plug in yet, because it's so early and I just don't have that ability yet. But when I do, I want to make sure that I'm changing and evolving to really help the people who are coming that want help. And if I have to do that, if I have to change a service that I offer to adjust to a person, like that's what I'm going to do. So it's really about putting a platform in place that people can come to. But the services that I offer, I want to make sure I'm tailoring them to the need of that particular person. So I'm still working on how to, I guess, effectively communicate that. Like right now, it does have specific services. It has like a transition service, which I think would be great for people coming out of the service initially, to have like kind of a plan in place of transition, but not necessarily just about like, okay, you have these skills so you can do this job, but an emotional transition is really what I want to focus on. And so I offer that. I think that it's hard for service members to come out of the military and grab onto something like that. So I don't know how exactly I'll market that, going forward. Because I know if someone came to me and they're like, hey, I can help you transition out of the military, I don't need that. I'm good, you know? But it's a service that I think is needed, and hopefully that it'll be marketed in a way that people can realize that. But then I also offer kind of like a shorter package, right? So you can come and you can have like 3 to 5 counseling sessions with me, and what is something that you really is on the forefront of your mind that you need to work on, but you can't quite get there. Um, so we can talk through that and try to like focus on like that one thing, because it's not a lot of sessions to really get to the root of a lot of deep-seated things. But if you have something, or if you've already been kind of on your healing journey for a long time, but you get to a point where you just kind of have a stuck point, like I can help through that in a few sessions by just kind of digging that out of somebody, asking the right questions, really focusing on them finding that answer inside rather than me just saying, oh, this works. I know it works because it worked for me, because we're all different, and that's not going to be the case for people. So I focus on helping them find the answers inside to whatever that issue is, and really digging down into the depths of what is blocking them from whatever that may be. So that's kind of another section that I offer. I also offer group or individual meditation sessions. It just helps with your daily life in general. But one of the biggest phases in the 6 phase meditation thing that's helped me was the forgiveness phase. So forgiving is been like scientifically proven to change brain chemistry. So forgiveness is huge. And so if I can help people really focus on forgiving themselves, forgiving, other people who've caused certain things in their life, I think that's going to be a huge healing property for a lot of people. And then I also offer like kind of a more fully encompassing kind of package for people who are just like, I've seen the efficacy of this, of how it works. Like, I'm all in. Let's do it. Let's get together and let's figure out what's going on with me, and let's start to heal. And again, those are going to continually change as time goes on, as I start to see like what people are actually wanting and what services are really helping, and things like that. But it's kind of just that platform to get started.
Yeah, I mean, forgiveness is, you're absolutely right. I feel though, to quote the Midnight Gospel, forgiveness is tricky. That's a tough one to get
Yes,
around if you aren't really prepared for it.
it is.
With your lived experience of all your time in the service, being a law enforcement officer, and then jumping into counseling, or having that going through that training, very different worlds. I'm curious because like the whole military, maybe I don't have lived experience as a police officer, maybe it might be something similar, but I feel like it's pretty common to see the whole institution as kind of not wanting anyone very different. Everyone's all about efficiency, uniforms, they're all the same. So I would imagine that you being involved in like veteran or LEO communities, you might be able to kind of spot a lot of similar types of trauma responses, stuff like that. When you went through your ayahuasca ceremony, did that reveal a lot to yourself that you were also able to like see in other people? Was there a lot of similar types of trauma and just like responses that from others in the community that you're able to interact with and kind of shed light on? How was like your interaction within the community received when you were first in that point, like coming right out of the experience?
Yeah, that's actually, it touches on a lot of deep things. So um prior to my ceremony, well, actually prior to my ceremony, I was still stuck in a place where I could read people really, really well based on, basically my upbringing. You have to read people to be safe. And then same with military and police. If you don't learn to read people, like, you're putting yourself in dangerous situations. So I learned to read people really, really well. And I could kind of see a lot of those things in people because I knew them in myself. But I just didn't care. I just didn't care about other people that much. And I did, I think within that vault I cared, but it was something that I didn't feel like I was allowed to show. It wasn't something that I could bring up and show that I cared about people. So subconsciously I had care and I had empathy and I had love for other people, but it wasn't at the forefront of my life. I pretty much stuffed that down. So I didn't see a lot of it in people because I wouldn't allow myself to. And then after my ceremony, so it was a 2-day ceremony, and the Friday evening was, I say it was a mild experience compared to my second day, but is what it did is it unlocked my ability to have true empathy, and to be able to, or not be able to, but have the thought that it's okay to express empathy. And it doesn't matter if the guy next to me thinks I'm a pussy. I don't care, right? Like, it gave me the ability to bring that to light inside of me. And that empathy is what allowed me to start seeing people and their traumas, and like you said, kind of seeing those similar responses, and like caring enough to start wanting to do something about it. It's like, so empathy is really like the theme of that first night of ceremony for me, and it started to change the way I was thinking about other people and what they were going through. Because before that, I was just stuck in that whole like, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine. And so I
And
didn't.
shedding that insecurity is a big thing as well. I
Yeah,
mean, how many people are going to just stop when they have the idea and not take any action because they're afraid about what other people are going to think? If when you
yeah,
realize that you know yourself, you have all the context, it's just that much more empowering. Sorry to interrupt you though.
yeah. No, no, you're definitely right. I mean, I think I had so many like shut down moments to myself because I was so worried about other people all the time, and I didn't want to come across a certain way, especially with the background that I had. I felt like I had to be this. And so if I come across somebody else who has that similar background, okay, we're going to be this together. Or if they didn't have that background, it's like, well, you're not really you're not really in that circle, so I don't need to deal with you. You know, it's not right. It's not a good thing to think, but it's what we kind of are conditioned to think. And it's tough to shed that conditioning if that's who you are. Like you said, shedding who you are as a, or who you think you are as a person is extremely difficult. Hard task. But that empathy really kind of started me on that path.
I'm noticing there's like this trend where when you begin to experience something for yourself, you're able to extend it to other people. Like you talked about self-love earlier.
Mhm.
It's yeah, I hear like this idea that once you get to like life is an experience, right? And we just
Yeah,
assume we know how to do everything. But
yeah,
like if you can't really point back to when you experienced it, like don't be surprised if you don't know how to do it.
yeah.
So how simple is that to just know that to engage in the process of learning to love yourself actually will like get you healthy enough to, dear God, love other people.
Right.
Like, you know,
Yeah, right.
having
But
having empathy and patience for yourself, my goodness, you might actually be able to have empathy and patience for others. But it's
yeah,
this internal process of allowing yourself to experience these things well enough where we become familiar with them enough
mhm.
where we can give them to other people. You know what I
That's
mean?
exactly right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. And we just spend so much time thinking that we can't give it to ourselves that we end up stuck in this little hole, this isolation hole, where our thoughts are just circular at that point. And
Yeah.
until we can like break ourselves off of that circular thought process, it's tough. And I
What
think that's where so many veterans find themselves stuck in.
That's what I was going to say, particularly for veterans, because it gets compounded by the military experience. Because I think one of the issues with trauma is it creates a very reactionary person. Your
Yeah.
amygdala is just like constantly, fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or
Uh,
flight. And then when you get into the military, I feel like they teach you how to use that
mhm.
maybe as a tool more so than you probably should. You know what I mean? And so when
Yes.
you get into the real world, you're still trying to apply those like over there tactics,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically there is no wrong decision. There's just the decision you make, and you just
As
have
long
to
as you act, as long as you
and,
act, you're fine.
and you can explain why you act. That's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Being able to explain in your after action report what happened and why you did it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you can explain why you did what you did, you're good. But the thing is, that doesn't work in the real world. That
It
doesn't work.
doesn't.
You know?
No, it doesn't. And the
Yeah.
police say the same thing. The police, this is what they teach from the very beginning is reasonable articulation. If you can articulate a reasonable action, then you're fine. It really doesn't matter what you do. Even if you take someone's life 90% of the time, if it's reasonably articulated, you're going to be fine. And you're right, it does not work in the real world. We think
Mhm.
it does, and we continue to do it because we're in this circular thought process, this box that we put ourselves in that's just so hard to break out of.
Because it's kept us alive this long.
Right.
I'm
And,
here.
and that's stored in your subconscious too. Even if you don't come home and think this is keeping me alive, it's stored inside of us. And we continue to think that fight or flight incident is life and death, and it might not even be close to life. It might just be a simple emotional response that could have just been like, oh, that kind of made me angry. That's all right, I can think about that later and deal with it then. But it
Yeah.
doesn't happen.
The day that I realized that life was not an emergency was like probably I think the day I started living. Like
Yeah.
yeah.
but how hard was it to get to that point? It
Oh
seems so
yeah,
simple.
yeah.
It seems so simple,
Well,
but
it's funny you talked about your process, and I like it because Alex and I did something really similar. But the idea of sitting with an experience, for me, a big one was like the idea of like helplessness, or not having control. I mean, imagine that, the idea of not having control, but just like letting it wash over you and it not be a big
Mhm.
deal and it not
Yeah.
being the end of the world. But what I started realizing is when you experience that emotion and you
Mhm.
just let it wash over you, once you let it wash over you and you experience it, now you get to decide what you do.
Yeah.
Choices
It's
now.
it's like separating ourselves, right, from our thoughts. Like our thoughts are my thoughts used to control everything that I did, right? So I would have this thought, and in my mind, I was right. Why am I right? Because I have all these experiences and all these reasons why I'm right. Well, that was my conditioning telling me that if this happens, then this. So until we deconstruct that conditioning, we're not able to separate ourselves from our thoughts, and then our thoughts control us. And so if we have a thought that this is a fight or flight dangerous situation, and then on top of that thought, our body's stored emotion comes up and it's going to be strong because we were in life and death situations before, and you have to have strong emotions and thoughts. And until you're able to separate and say, oh, that's just a thought, let me think about why I need to separate myself from that and why that's not necessarily true. Where am I now and what's happening now? Then we continue to get stuck in that response. And it's just a trauma response to what we've had from the past.
Yep.
So, yeah, I completely agree. I think it's so important to let that just wash over us and just accept it.
And I think the thing that gets me is like I remember getting out of the military and I just listened to what you said, and that was just such a succinct, simple explanation of like what it is, the process and experience and an emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And why couldn't they teach us that in addition to how to make a resume before you got out? You know what
Right.
I mean?
Like why, yeah, why are we keeping ourselves from this healing? What about what about the rest of our lives needs to be the same as it was in that particular set?
Yep.
So this
Yeah.
is why I think stuff like this is so amazing, and I'm so grateful to be here, is because it opens that discussion for other people, other veterans, other people who are struggling in general, because it doesn't only apply to veterans. Trauma is trauma is trauma. To open that to other people and see like, oh, other people have experienced all this trauma too, and it is possible to heal. Because I didn't think it was possible. I thought that was going to be it.
Mm.
So yeah, it's awesome to be here and have other people here with us.
And then I think also we were talking before, this is actually a bit of a synchronistic kind of event here. This is 1 year from when Luke did his ceremony.
Yep.
So this is the actual weekend a year ago that he did this initial process. So just so happy to have you here and to be able to
Yeah,
and like share this anniversary with you under these circumstances.
absolutely. I'm so happy to be here too. Like thinking back on that, the Sunday after my second ceremony would be about now. Now is about the time that I would be driving to the airport to fly home. And thinking back on that time and like how I felt after that ceremony, like it brings it back. It's like this just you just feel all this energy and lightness inside of you, and it's wild. It's just absolutely life changing.
Yeah, definitely.
Hearing all this just gives me a lot of hope. I speaking to one of our previous guests from this event, we got some interesting word that hopefully, from what I understand, Congress is pushing for FDA approval for psilocybin and MDMA therapies for the VA to be available by this upcoming summer. Hearing that sounds very soon. I
Yeah.
don't know what all has to fall into place for that to actually start actually happening by the summer, but I feel like if that's the word, I'm gonna put hope. I'm gonna put a little bit of hope in that. Maybe that's not
Yeah.
a great idea, but
No, hope is
just
always a
know.
good thing.
I know it's just, but when it gets snuffed out, it's that much more of a heartbreak.
I know.
Um, but just after hearing like maps, and it seems like 66% is the number that keeps coming up in these studies as far as people that go through with a diagnosis of PTSD for over 20 years at minimum to come out. 66% come out without being able to be diagnosed with it any longer. So I'm really hoping that maybe the whole veteran community with the whole concept of mental illness kind of being attached to it after coming out of the service, is going to spur this along. And then after we see the efficacy for veterans, then it'll just help that much more of a push to just for everybody else. And because that's really what we want, because it seems like a lot of our chaos and just the pain and suffering that we're putting on each other in the world and just in our own country is, just the viewing people as other, insecurity in ourselves, and we have to lash out, stuff like that. So being able to, just from my own experience and from what a lot of our guests have said, is that we'll be able to put a lot of this to rest, and hopefully we can start working more as we as countrymen will be able to work more collaboratively than competitively, and we could start carving out something that everyone's benefiting and living a life worth living, instead of the happy few, and while taking advantage of the majority that are having to suffer. So yeah, there's a lot of hope
to bring people together. I mean, people in general are always stronger together, and like you said, we need to stop kind of separating ourselves, and we tend to do that as veterans too. It's like, well, we're veterans, they're civilians, but there's so much collaboration that needs to take place for people's healing in general and for society in general. So important to come together. It doesn't matter what walk of life it is.
Yeah, and a lot of that is unfortunately ego, and we can't get away from that forever. I mean, a lot of people I hear say like, I had an ego death, and I'm like, is it still dead? Because
it's gonna pop back up.
But even just going through a couple of different, let's just say the word ceremonies, being able to have that experience of having it pushed into the background, it does kind of bring with it the realization of just the benefit of, I don't know, unification of people. Because I mean, how many people have existed and none of us are exactly the same, and it's like there's got to be a reason for that. We're a social, people are social. We need to be collaborative, and it's like we're kind of, the right means are being used in the wrong way, and we're paying the price.
Yeah, definitely true. Yeah, and you're right, that ego is going to pop up, and the same with like some of these PTSD symptoms and stuff, right? Like even if you never experience it the same way, like these things are still going to pop up in your life through your whole life, because you've still had those experiences. And so just kind of accepting that things don't just get perfect, right? Like, but having the ability to work through those situations is part of that healing. Is okay, now I have the tools, now I have the ability to work through those things. So if the ego pops up again, you're like, oh, I know what that is. That's my ego, and that popped up because of this. And now I can, the next time this thing happens that will trigger that ego to the forefront, I can say, no, I'm good. Like I'll handle this without my ego. And it's the same with your PTSD symptoms. Like you may have something pop up, but you know what it is, you know where it came from, and then you can work through that in a healthy way that doesn't continue to keep you stuck in the cycle.
I was going to comment earlier. It's so interesting. A lot of the process that you're talking about is something that Alex and I went through over like a 6-month period back in like 2021. Yeah. And we got to this place because we read a paper called The Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Experience, but it introduced us to meditation. And so we started using like the tools they talked about in the paper to meditate, binaural beats and stuff. And we were able to kind of go through a lot of the processing stuff, sitting with emotions, learning to be less reactionary. Life's not an emergency. It's like, slow down, man. It's not going to be the end of everything. But I just think it's so interesting that you get there so many different ways, it's like what radically different approaches. Like one's like talking about like the physical properties of the universe and how to use that to meditate, and the other one is kind of having the exact same conversation. Just I don't remember where you said you did this ceremony, but just in a much more rural environment.
Yeah. And the Gateway Project, a lot of the same principles were applied to the course that I took, the Silva Ultramind from Jose Silva. He like, a lot of that study was a lot of cross referencing and cross studying, and same with me. I mean, it gave me that ability to slow everything down and to think through things without it being a reaction, and it's a huge force. And I was telling Alex earlier, one of the biggest things from my second night of the ceremony is like I saw God, and I saw his energy and his love that encompassed everything. And part of that energy that we can access in our meditative state is our relationship with God. And that's another big like integration portion for me, is being able to feel that actual connection with who I believe is my creator, you know? Just huge things come from just being open.
Yeah.
Just being open.
They're a great tool. They're a great tool to kind of put a lot of yourself aside to be able to address what's really going on, what's kind of in the foundation, so to speak. And yeah, I just can't recommend enough people trying to take it upon themselves to kind of further know themselves and develop their practice in a way that serves them. And like something like binaural beats, Brian was saying, helps you snap into the state of meditation. If you're not a big journaler, definitely check out, put the attempt, because I feel like you could hold on to those, let's say, epiphanies that you have, instead of having to return to the ceremony to be able to get it back. I've gotten a lot of just being able to go back and read about the experiences that I had right after I had my journal next to me, and as soon as I come out of something like DMT, I'll just immediately start trying to hold on to what I can, because it's fleeting, a lot like a dream. And
Yeah.
you know, so yeah, I definitely just recommend people to, no one knows yourself more than you. You have all the context, so it's going to take a little bit of effort and maybe a lot of discomfort to be
A
able
lot of
to
discomfort.
yeah, it's not easy, but from what I understand, it's worth it.
Yep.
So
It's so worth it. And eventually the discomfort lessens, and it's not as hard. It's not as hard to start to feel those things. It's not as hard to ask yourself those questions that need to be asked, or dig into the past that needs to be dug into for you to heal, and for you to just pull those things out. It does lessen. It may feel impossible to start, and I think that's why it's so important to have these conversations and have people with you who are willing to just be there for you and to help you through those things. Like trip sitters or shamans or just fellow veterans who are there for you emotionally. Like, it doesn't matter. Just like that sense of community to come together and to show each other love and care and empathy and all those things that we've shut out a lot from
Yeah.
ourselves and from other people.
yeah, I feel like we of all should know kind of to be able should know better than to maybe poo-poo a course of action that would benefit us before giving it enough time with enough effort. Because I mean, going into day one of boot camp as opposed to your graduation day, it's like, how am I going to make it to the end? And then by the end, you're just so into the routine, and you just build up that resilience to, I mean, you could wake me up with throwing a trash can against my bed, I don't care. This does not matter. I'm going to get my stuff done. And so I just want to encourage people that are looking to trying to find out what the heck's going on with them, and trying to find a way to a happier life. Put the effort. Journaling, I feel like when I tell a veteran, hey, you should journal, they're like, okay, yeah, I'll make sure I do that. And it's
But
like, oh,
it is
please.
so helpful. It's so helpful. And that, again, it goes back to being open. As long as you're open to questioning what you think that conditioning is hard. I know it's hard, but question it as much as possible, because those questions are going to lead to answers. Even if it takes you a week of the same question, eventually you will have an answer. And go ahead.
No, I was just if you don't, I feel like you miss out a lot on journaling if you're not used to being very honest with yourself. Because if you're just going to marinate in this feeling of not being enough, or being insecure, or being upset, you just have that feeling that you're kind of, it just adds to your overall frustration. You're going to lash out at your kids or the person in line at the store. But if when you actually if the practice where it actually starts to show its efficacy is putting the thoughts into actual words. And even if the words aren't exactly right, you could write more words, and you could reorient yourself to get yourself right on target.
Yeah, no, 100% true. Your brain will do what it needs to do. We just have to put that effort into it. And like you said, don't ruminate in the feeling. Find out why that feeling is there. Like, continually question everything, and you're going to find answers. And once those answers start to come, it's like getting a new piece of the puzzle. It's like, oh, wait a minute, that goes here. because of this, and that makes sense now. And then you're going to start to plug those pieces in as you go, and eventually you're going to have a picture, and you can paint that picture however you want to paint it. You can stay in your despair and your depression, and you're going to have a picture that doesn't help. But if you choose to start to find those pieces within you, and the choice might be hard, it might be hard to find them, but stick with it. Just don't give up on yourself. Continue to look for those pieces and paint yourself a beautiful picture that's going to rest, just going to be for the rest of your life, that you can always look back on and build on and continue to change and make more colorful. I mean, it's a wonderful thing. Just don't give up on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I could add another thing to like that really helps with this whole process is finding community that is on the same page as you or is on a page that you want to be on. I can't tell you how much time that I've just felt I was in the darkness as far as just feeling alone, even when I felt like I was on the right path, because there was no one around me that was on that same thing. And to be honest, the only reason why this whole process has gotten to where it's at, from me being someone that's, drinking to go to sleep and hating the job that I'm in, to now is, I mean, a lot of it is Brian just kind of like, we're still working it. We're on the right path.
Yeah.
We're on that right path. So I just have, for people that are listening and are wanting to, you know, uh, just perfect their process, that's a big piece you don't want to forget is community. And that's the whole point. That's circling back into being collaborative, and it reinforces with the stuff that you know to be true, and it helps you deny and defy the stuff that is just an insecurity or an obstacle, stuff that is holding you back. So yeah, and to add to that, I've been hearing a lot of people saying that they would like a Veterans Psychedelic Discourse in-person event so that we could have more community and touch base, face-to-face interactions and stuff. Right now it's just myself and Brian that are running this. So, but like I said, we could use more hands. So if anyone is interested in helping to, get involved in that way and kind of make this group an event a little bit more robust and more face-to-face interactions, then
Yeah.
we're all for it. That's and it doesn't life. I mean, I like having my veteran community just because it's similar lived experience and we could relate. And then I like to get, I like to be playful and, if you're a different branch, I'll make fun of you for whatever reason.
We have to, right? Like
It comes with the territory. So I like to, that's where I let my playfulness come out. And so I feel like I'm more fully myself when I'm able to play in that way, that then maybe someone else might be a little bit, not feel like I'm being like abrasive or something. But yeah, that's just wanted to make sure to bring up community. Brian, did you have anything else? I was thinking about opening it up for questions if there was any.
Yeah, the community thing, 100%. Like, I mean, intentionality is one thing, but when you can set two people's intention on a single objective, like that's where the power is. And when you look at like a lot of like the old like religious writings, like where two or more are gathered together, I wonder if that's not the esoteria that they're touching on. Like you need to get people together to put their intentionality together, and that's how you affect change. So I'm not a Christian or anything like that, but when I hear those old texts and I'm like, I wonder what they're really saying. Like,
right.
I wonder what like what it was before the edit. Like,
yeah,
so,
there's truth in there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a lot of truth, and we know that, right? We've seen it.
Yeah.
Community is so huge, and yeah, definitely to mirror what Alex and Brian said, we tend to isolate as veterans who are going through hard times, but we can definitely help each other. Iron sharpens iron, and when we're both, like you said, have that same intentionality, it's like a gym partner. If you feel unmotivated today, well, guess what? Brian's ready to go. And so guess what, Alex, you're going to go.
Yeah, I'm squatting and Brian's supporting my hips.
Yep.
Slow.
So it's so important. It's something that I struggle with, and I'll probably continue to struggle with for a long time, is just putting yourself out there. I mean, I'm doing it now. I'm making myself do it. Just being on a podcast is hard for me, but I think it's great. And I met people that I would have never met otherwise unless you put yourself out there. And yeah, you can change each other's change each other's world for the better. That's for sure.
I wonder if we're not actually like coming out of something. There's this book called Bowling Alone. It's by a guy named Robert Putnam. He talks about like how society kind of collapsed in the 1980s and the 90s. And by the 2000s, when he wrote the book, it was completely gone. He tracks like Rotary Club participation. Bowling leagues are actually like his baseline that they just completely dissolved over that 20-year period of time. But when I hear people talk now, I feel like we're coming out of that decay, of that social loss, and people are kind of getting desperate for like that connection again. So I feel like we're actually kind of growing into something new right now. And when you kind of track with like the last 40 years, it's like we've had these 2 generations of decay. And it's like, I wonder if we're not growing into something new right now. Cause like what you're saying, I hear everybody. What you're saying, I hear everybody say. What you're saying, I hear me feel. You know what I mean? Like it's like it resonates. It's the reason why we're all here, you know. We're curious. We want to get out, you know, we want to see each other, we want to talk, we want to we want to be a part of something.
For sure.
You know.
How often do you go back into like a practice that involves psychedelics as far as your day to day? I think you mentioned that you don't really go too much on like big trips. What do you do to kind of keep yourself on the path that you feel that you have going for you?
Yeah, very rarely do I look to go back to kind of the psychedelic experience. Every once in a while, I feel like it's kind of needed. If I feel like I kind of fall into a state that I'm just like, oh, it's just real hard to break out of. Sometimes I'll feel, you know, like, okay, well, let me just get something that I know is going to kind of give me that extra push to get back to that state. But it is fairly rare, and what I really focus on is mostly that meditative experience of why am I feeling now like I did 6 months ago, or why am I feeling now like I did when I was still in that state of not able to heal? What is kind of, is it an outside factor? Is it still something that's stored in my body that's just kind of, you know, just lingering or just kind of hanging on? And I look for those things. I do a lot of visualization. I think visualization is a huge key to our minds. And so like I will actually visualize going inside of my body and looking for something, you know, that is holding on, that is stored. And I'll visualize myself pulling it out of whatever it's stuck on, and I'm looking at it, and I'll try to like bring an incident to mind that maybe fits that, whatever that thing is that I see. And it's going to be different for everybody, right? Everybody's their own creative self. So I do that a lot, and that kind of helps bring me back to where my current state is. I also try to live in the moment a lot more than I ever used to. My whole experience before was what's happening in the future and what's keeping me in the past, but not a lot of present moment experiences. It was a lot of depression from past or anxiety from future. And so I try to really pull myself into the present, because there's no other time. The past is gone, the future doesn't exist. There's no other time but this second right now. And so I do a lot of mindfulness when it comes to being present. And then for me, like Brian said, he's not a Christian, and I don't think that I can really fall into the denominational realm anymore, but I do believe in God. And like I said, my second ceremony, I experienced God in a way that I've never have. And so I've been able to build a personal connection with God through that opening, you know, that ceremony that opened my insides. And having that personal connection, I found so much peace in life. And no matter what I'm going through, if I can hold on to faith, then it really lessens my like dark side, my anxiety, my depression, like all those things. I can just say, oh, you know what, this is this, and let it go. Whatever happens, and I'm going to live in that present moment. And so that's been a huge kind of integration for me as well. And I never thought that meditation was a thing. I thought it was just ridiculous. But I can't express enough how much meditation has helped me. Just being able to access those subconscious levels. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's something I've been missing out on. Myself and Brian did it a lot when we were first initiating our practice that we had going on for a while, but over time it's fallen off. And as of late, I've been trying to incorporate back into my week. And so I feel like I've gotten something else out of it. I've been able to put a lot of my anxiety to rest because I'm in school right now, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, this and that. I got to worry about this personal life stuff, this and this, and it helps me reset and be and kind of organize the brain and put everything back into its place so that I could kind of address things what I need to, instead of it's like having your room clean. I'm going to pull out this
Right.
when I know that I need it instead of having everything just kind of a mess all over the place. But yeah,
Yeah,
we have a
it's a skill too, right? Like if we stop meditating for a while, it's going to be harder for us to get into a level of consciousness, right? And if we don't do it for a long period of time, it's going to be even harder, or we're going to start to feel the same things that we felt in the past, or whatever the case. It's a skill that you continually work at and sharpen, and it's
yeah,
not a one and done. Nothing ever is, you know. And that's
right.
Candidly,
our healing journey. Our healing journey is a day-to-day continual thing.
I was gonna say candidly, that's what I love about the binaural beats is in the paper they talk about how just the addition of those can give you skills of like a 20-year meditator, because they actually just lock you into a meditative state.
Yeah.
If you guys haven't tried it, give it a try, man. Theta
Oh,
waves
that's
are
amazing.
absolutely incredible. Yeah, it's like a meditation hack. It literally tricks your brain into getting into a meditative state, which is really just like the frequency
Theta, right?
response. So your hemispheres just kind of link up. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
very
it's
fascinating.
the whole like energy frequency realm is just extremely fascinating. Like frequencies control and make up pretty much everything in our world, and we don't look at it. We're just like, just a sound.
That and our current theory on physics tells us that solid matter may just be light waves collapsing when they make contact with each other. And so it's kind of like, you know what I mean? What do you do with that? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. What the
Uh,
um, let's see. We got a couple questions in the chat. To what extent do you or intend to include psychedelics into your coaching of others? So, I mean, depending on what state you're in,
uh,
if let's just say the VA gets uh, great reactions to that type of therapy, and the U.S. start opening it up for just anybody in the U.S., is that something that you're going to look at as far as incorporating into your services?
it absolutely is going to be something that I would like to incorporate as soon as we're able to, because it's another tool, right? Like, and that's part of being open-minded and questioning is we've been told it's not a tool. We've been told it's illegal, it's bad, it's this certain thing. That's what we've been told. But I'm not going to just accept that. So I have had to do my own deconstruction in that process, and I know the efficacy of that tool. And if I'm gonna do, I will try to tailor that to the person. Like, I don't think that every single person that I come in contact with, I need to recommend psychedelics, and that's the one off. This is for everybody. However, there's a lot of kind of pre work you can do with someone to find out if they fall in line with this being good for them, right? And so I definitely want to incorporate that for the people that need it, and find kind of a tailored way to really work up to that and say, is this right for this person? Which I haven't done yet because I don't plan on incorporating it until it actually is legal. But it's 100% a tool that has been life changing for me, and I think I would be remiss if I just let that go.
Right. Yeah. It feels that like a lot of people with their view on psychedelics, it's when seeing how effective it is for some people, seeing some people's reactions at face value, they're like, this is it. This is all I need. And once I get all I need is some mushrooms, and I'm gonna have my life on track.
And that's it.
And and it feels that way maybe sometimes, but in the end, it kind of gives you a glimpse at yourself it gives you that opportunity to look at your life with the ego, put it a little bit into the background, so you can kind of assess things in a little bit different way than you know without minding the idea of being uncomfortable with some of the stuff that might come with like forgiveness and just like knowing yourself. It doesn't it makes I feel like it might make the practice simpler but not easier, and
Yeah.
so you can take that with a grain of salt, but Let's see. How about the value of microdosing fungus? What are your thoughts on microdosing and the value of that?
I've actually done a little bit of microdosing just to kind of test it out, and I found more, I guess, day to day positive effects from microdosing than I have from like larger ceremonial psilocybin experiences. I've from the like kind of the larger dose ones, I've gotten like little tidbits of things here and there. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Let me hold on to that, and I'll look at that later. I've had those, but not like just big life changing experiences. And I know a lot of people who have. And so again, this is just kind of what works for me or what didn't work or whatever. And I've done microdosing a little bit here and there, and I've felt when I've done that, I have felt a lot kind of lighter, and just it's almost like it dampens your ego trying to come forward. It's like it kind of pushes it in the background a little bit. But I'm just the type of person, and this doesn't isn't for everybody. It's just my personal experience that I don't want to rely on a singular thing that I have to actually take. I want to get to a point where I can do all these things internally and bring all these however we want to call it, I'll just say negative things inside to the forefront and deal with them with no outside factors whatsoever. And again, that's just me. I want to get to that point. I'm not there yet, and I'm probably not even close. But that's my ultimate goal. So I tend to use something to see what its effects are, and if it works, then I try to see how long between those things where I start to feel different again, and then I try to analyze that. And is there a way for me to get to that same point using just my own insides, my own abilities? And that's really what I try to do personally. That way, there's never a point in time, because the VA they'll give you drugs for the rest of your life, and just drug on drug on drug, and they don't care. But I don't want to be that. I don't want to be stuck in that. And it's the same for plant medicine. I don't want to be stuck in plant medicine either. So that's just my personal thing on it. I think it's great for a lot of people, and a lot of um, people need it for different periods of time. People need different doses, different periods. Everybody needs different things. A lot of things that worked for other people didn't work for me. And that's the same with microdosing, same with big ceremonies. It's going to work for some people, great. And other people, it's not going to be as effective, or it's just not in line with what they want. And that's fine,
Yeah. Yeah, in my experience, I feel that microdosing has been very effective for myself, coming out of having a period of larger trips that I was using to really get to the crux of what I had going on. And so after I've been given this laundry list of things to work on myself, I feel like I don't really need to take a big trip for the rest of my life. I already kind of have like so much to work on. That might change in the future, but I feel that microdosing, especially if like, I mean, not a medical professional, don't take this as medical advice. But I feel that like after incorporating microdosing, I don't take pharmaceuticals anymore. And I could now feel when I have depression coming on. And it's not like my life is now completely without depression, but what I feel like I want to say that I would usually have like a bout of depression for like a month. That might be hyperbole, but it would be at least 2.5 weeks. And now I could recognize it coming on. And if I start my little microdosing regimen, I could cut that into 3 days and just have, just be so much better for it. And this is without having to be locked in on pharmaceuticals. And so it's all about what you're doing, what your intentions are, the practice. If you have, it's all, yeah. So another question that we have is microdosing plus meditation.
Love it.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Because you're not going to really get anywhere if you don't have direction, and that's where that meditation is going to come in. And so being able to put stuff aside, be able to know exactly what part of yourself that you want to analyze, break down, and understand better, then those are the right tools to do that job. And so I couldn't recommend those enough for someone that would have a similar experience to myself. But yeah, it's all about it, to lean on an old Marine Corps saying, know yourself and seek self-improvement. And it's just that's all I could really say about it. I have a question. Going through academia, your lived experience, I'm curious if you have any books to mention as far as that have been helpful or insightful, given you anything
You
worth.
broke up.
Oh,
Broke up.
do you have any books that from like you've gone through from school or your lived experience that you've come across that have been helpful in like your insights?
There's two books that I usually like to recommend that were just extremely informative for me, and then also just very helpful in practice. And the first one that's really more informative, that it really opened my mind to a lot of reasons why I've reacted and why I've kind of had the thought processes that I had, and just who I am in general. It's called the ACOA trauma syndrome, the effects of childhood trauma on adult relationships. And so it's basically about children who grow up in homes of alcoholics or drug addicts and how they develop based on that environment. It was extremely enlightening. So I recommend it to everybody. And it's got some medical terms and stuff. So some people are like, I don't like it. It was amazing, amazing book for me. So I definitely recommend at least trying it. And then the second one was called Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins, I believe. And it really goes into not really the spiritual realm of things, but it goes into kind of what we've been talking about, of really digging inside and bringing certain things up. But then the ultimate kind of goal is to literally let all these things go. Like, let it go. It's not part of me anymore. It may have been part of me, but now I'm taking it out and I'm letting it go. And I don't need to hold on to any of this stuff. And it's helped me pretty significantly just to hear those words and to try to put those into practice. I mean, someone cuts you off in traffic. Like, your ultimate goal in that situation is to simply let it go. You have no idea what they're going through, why they did it. You have no clue. But we can technically choose how we respond, and how we maybe we'll have an initial response that we don't like, and maybe eventually we can get to the point where those initial responses are changed. But the goal is to, once we have those, is to understand, oh, that's that response, that's that emotion, like you said earlier, Alex. Maybe even put a name to it, and then say, I don't really need that right now, and let it go. And it's a really, really good book, well written, easy to read, and pretty life changing if you put it into practice.
Yeah, pretty incredible. The idea of learning how to not take life personally. It actually
Yeah,
makes it a lot more enjoyable when you're not taking it all personally. It's just what's
it,
happening, man. Enjoy yourself. Like,
you know, so true.
yeah.
And I took
I
a lot personally throughout my life that never needed to be mine. I didn't need that. Yeah. Go ahead, Alex.
I took everything personally.
Everything.
I was so upset.
Yeah, yeah, all the time. It's like everything was against me, or everything was about whatever I thought it was. It was the truth, and yeah, it's hard. It's hard to live life like that.
I have a great story. When Alex and I first met, we started hanging out. We actually met at a church group for veterans. It broke up and we kept hanging out. And I was walking through a parking lot one day out to my car, and somebody honked at me. And like, my reaction personalized everything. I like bucked up, my chest got all big. I turned around and I'm like
Yeah.
ready to get a fighting somebody in a parking lot. And I turned around and it's a familiar face. It's just a friend who knows me. But
Just
like,
wants
my
to say
brain was
hi.
incapable of like, not like, good God, man.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And
Oh,
I was the exact same way. It didn't matter. It could have been something so small.
just like, what the
Yeah.
heck?
Yeah.
It was like
Ugh.
in front of Coles. I'm like, hey.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh gosh.
life is what you make it.
Yeah,
It is.
exactly.
It is.
So,
And we hear all these sayings all the time, right? Those little sayings,
yeah.
and it just never sinks in
Yeah.
until until it does.
That's so funny. For me, that was such a big deal, was like starting to take the cliches seriously. Like when Seneca talks about the idea that we like experience most pain in our imagination, Like, think about that. Like, oh damn, that's a burn, yo. Like,
Right.
I need to slow down and like start like reconsidering, you know, like there's another one, like how you're not responsible for the circumstances you find yourself in. You're responsible for every day after that. Like even the simple Maya Angelou stuff, do the best you can until you learn better, then do better. Like these have become personal mantras for me that I would have had total disdain for before, but like they're so deeply meaningful.
They are, yeah. And if you apply them and instead of just looking them as a cliche, you're right. It's transformational.
But then your ego's got to back off and realize that maybe the bumper sticker does have a little bit of wisdom in it.
So true.
So true.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions before we wrap this up?
Anything at all? I'm an open book at this point in my life. Try to be anyway.
What's your credit score? No, I'm just kidding.
You're pretty good, but with all these lawyers, not so great.
Well, I'd like to thank our guest Luke and the audience for joining us today. If you're going to be watching this on YouTube and would like to join us for a future show, feel free to visit our Meetup page, where you can check out our calendar and see what we have planned. Next month, for December, we're planning on having sacred animal medicines with Sincere 7 Genesis. That should be a pretty good show. But with all that said, we meet every third Sunday of the month at 11 a.m. So thanks for joining us, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I really, really appreciate being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us.